They built the cage you're living in and convinced you it's a home. They rigged the system, cashed out, and then turned around and called you weak for suffocating inside it. You know their faces. You've heard their lectures. Work harder. Stop complaining. Back in my day. But here's the part they'll never tell you. They're not disappointed in you. They're terrified of you because you're starting to see through the lie. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This isn't about generational war. This is about psychological manipulation on a scale so massive that an entire generation convince themselves they're the victims while holding all the cards. Baby boomers, the golden children of history, the last ones to drink from the well before they poisoned it, and now they stand at the top of the ladder they pulled up behind them, screaming down at you about entitlement. You want to know why you can't afford a house? Why you're drowning in debt they didn't have? Why the world feels like it's designed to crush you? Look up. They're still there, still voting, still hoarding, still refusing to let go. And the psychology behind it? It's darker than you think. Let me show you something. 1955. A man walks out of high school, gets a job at the factory, buys a house at 22, raises 4 kids on one income, and retires with a pension at 60. No degree, no debt, no stress. That was normal. That was the world baby boomers inherited. Not because they were smarter, not because they worked harder. Because the game was easy, the economy was booming, housing was cheap, education was affordable, jobs were everywhere. They played life on tutorial mode and then had the audacity to write the strategy guide. And what did they tell you? If I can do it, anyone can. But here's the poison in that sentence. It erases context. It erases privilege. It erases the fact that the world they entered no longer exists because they dismantled it. They didn't just succeed. They consumed. They took the cheap houses and turned them into investment properties. They took the affordable education and privatized it. They took the stable jobs and outsourced them. They built wealth on a foundation of abundance and then voted to make sure nobody else could access it. And when you call them out, when you show them the numbers, when you prove that the math doesn't work anymore, they don't apologize. They double down because admitting the system is broken means admitting they broke it. And their egos can't survive that. Here's where it gets psychological. Baby boomers don't just believe they earned everything. They believe they deserve everything. There's a difference. Earning implies effort. Deserving implies entitlement. And they are the most entitled generation in modern history. They were raised by parents who survived the Great Depression and World War II. Parents who sacrificed everything. Parents who wanted their children to have it easier. So boomers grew up in a world that handed them opportunity and told them they were special. And they believed it. They internalized it. They built their entire identity around it. This is the psychology of the golden child. Praised for existing, rewarded for showing up, told that success is inevitable if you just try. And when success came, they didn't see luck. They saw proof. Proof that they were chosen. Proof that they were superior. Proof that anyone who didn't make it simply didn't want it enough. This is why they can't empathize with your struggle. Empathy requires the ability to imagine a reality different from your own, and they can't, because their reality was so easy, so frictionless, so abundant, that struggle feels like failure to them. Not systematic, personal. When you tell a boomer you can't afford rent, they don't hear a housing crisis. They hear excuses. When you tell them you're buried in student debt, they don't see predatory lending. They see poor choices. When you tell them you're working 2 jobs and still can't get ahead, they don't see wage stagnation. They see laziness. Because in their world, hard work equaled success. And if you're not succeeding, you must not be working hard. It's that simple to them. It's that cruel. But let's go deeper. Let's talk about what they're really afraid of. You. Not you as a person, you as a threat. You represent change. You represent progress. You represent a world that doesn't need them anymore, and that terrifies them because their entire identity is tied to being needed, to being in control, to being right. Boomers were the first generation to experience mass media, television, radio, advertising. They were the first to be marketed to as a demographic, the first to be told they were the future. And they believed it. They became the culture. They became the economy. They became the power. And for 60 years, the world revolved around them. But now they're aging. Now they're being replaced. Now the culture is shifting toward voices they don't recognize, ideas they don't understand, values they don't share. And instead of adapting, they're resisting. They're clinging. They're fighting. Because letting go means becoming irrelevant. And irrelevance is death to them. This is why they won't retire. This is why they dominate politics. This is why they refuse to pass the torch. Not because they need the money, not because they love the work, because they need the validation, they need to matter, they need to be seen, and the moment they step aside, they disappear, and they know it. Now here's the dark part, the part nobody talks about. They know they failed you. Deep in the parts of themselves they don't look at, they know. They see the world they're leaving behind, the climate crisis they ignored, the wealth gap they created, the systems they broke. They see it, and it eats at them, but they can't admit it, because admitting it means admitting their lives were built on a lie, admitting that they weren't the heroes of their own story, admitting that they weren't the greatest generation. They were the greediest. So they project, they deflect, they blame. They call you snowflakes while they melt down over a coffee cup. They call you entitled while they collect Social Security they didn't fully fund. They call you addicted to technology while they doom scroll Facebook for 8 hours a day. Every criticism they throw at you is a confession. Every lecture is a defense mechanism. Every dismissal is a shield. Because if they stop talking, they'll have to listen. And if they listen, they'll have to face the truth. And the truth will destroy them. So what do you do with this? How do you navigate a world controlled by people who refuse to see reality? You stop seeking their approval. You stop trying to convince them. You stop waiting for them to understand. Because they won't. They can't. Their psychology won't allow it. They're locked in a prison of their own making, and you don't have the key. But here's what you do have: clarity. You see the game now. You see the board. You see the players. You see the rules they made to keep you losing. And once you see it, you can't be manipulated by it anymore. You stop internalizing their judgment. You stop believing their lies. You stop playing their game. You create your own. You build outside their system. You network around their gatekeeping. You adapt faster than they can regulate. You become ungovernable, not through rebellion, through evolution. This is the shift. This is the power, not in hating them, not in fighting them, in understanding them so completely that they lose all power over you. Let me tell you what they're really scared of. They're scared you'll stop asking permission. They're scared you'll stop needing their institutions. They're scared you'll stop believing the story they told about how the world works, because that story is crumbling. The myth of meritocracy is dying. The illusion of the American dream is fading. The promise that hard work equals success is exposed as propaganda, and you're the first generation to grow up seeing it clearly. You didn't live through their golden age. You inherited their consequences. You didn't drink the Kool-Aid. You saw the bodies, and now you're asking questions they can't answer. Why is housing unaffordable? Why is education a debt trap? Why are wages stagnant while productivity soars? Why do we work more and have less? Why is the planet dying? Why are we told to sacrifice while they hoard? And they have no answers. Just deflection, just blame, just the same tired script about bootstraps and entitlement. But you're not buying it anymore, and that's what terrifies them, because the moment you stop believing, their power ends. Here's the final truth. Baby boomers are not your enemy. They're a cautionary tale, a warning, a mirror showing you what happens when a generation prioritizes comfort over courage, security over change, self-interest over legacy. They had the chance to build a better world, and they chose to build a bigger house. They had the opportunity to sacrifice for the future, and they chose to consume the present. They had the power to leave things better than they found them, and they chose to extract every last drop. And now they're old and scared and desperate to be remembered as something other than what they are. A generation that had everything and left nothing. Don't hate them for it. Learn from it, because the choices you make now will define what the next generation says about you. You can repeat their mistakes, or you can break the cycle. You can hoard, or you can build. You can consume, or you can create. You can cling to a dying world, or you can plant seeds for a new one. The psychology of baby boomers isn't a mystery. It's a pattern, and patterns can be broken, but only by those who see them clearly, only by those who refuse to repeat them, only by those who understand that the true mark of strength isn't domination, it's transformation. And you're capable of that, but only if you stop looking to them for answers. They don't have them. They never did. The answers are in you, in your ability to adapt, to innovate, to create systems they couldn't imagine, to build communities they wouldn't recognize, to define success in ways they never considered. That's your power. That's your path. And it doesn't require their permission. This channel isn't for everyone. It's not for people who want to be comforted. It's not for people who want easy answers. It's for the ones who see the shadows and walk toward them anyway. The ones who understand that truth is more valuable than comfort. The ones who refuse to live blind just because ignorance is easier. If you're still here, you're one of them. You're awake, and you can't go back to sleep. So don't try. Subscribe if you want more truth. Leave if you want more lies. Either way, the game continues. But now you know the rules. And that changes everything. You ever notice how they talk about sacrifice? How they built everything with their bare hands? How they saved the world? Let me tell you what they don't mention. The sacrifice wasn't theirs. It was their parents'. The greatest generation fought wars, survived depressions, rebuilt nations from ashes. They knew real hunger, real loss, real sacrifice. And what did they do with that trauma? They tried to make sure their children never felt it. They built abundance. They created opportunity. They handed baby boomers a world on a silver platter and said, "Here, don't suffer like we did." And boomers took it all, and then rewrote history to make themselves the heroes. They didn't storm beaches. They protested for a few years in college and then got corporate jobs. They didn't rebuild economies. They inherited growing ones and then financialized them. They didn't create the modern world. They inherited it, strip-mined it, and sold the pieces. But listen to them talk. Listen to how they frame their story. We built this country. We made this possible. We created everything you have. No. You inherited everything, and you spent it. There's a psychological term for this. Inherited privilege mistaken for earned superiority. They confused being born at the right time with being born special, and that confusion became their personality. Here's what makes this so insidious. They genuinely don't see it. This isn't malicious. It's delusional. They've constructed an entire psychological framework where their success is proof of their virtue, where their wealth is evidence of their work ethic, where their comfort validates their choices, and any evidence to the contrary gets filtered out. Cognitive dissonance at industrial scale. You show them the data. home prices relative to wages, education costs relative to inflation, healthcare expenses, retirement insecurity, climate projections. You lay it all out, and they'll look at it and say, but I managed just fine, as if their individual experience invalidates statistical reality, as if their personal anecdote overrides aggregate data. This is the psychology of the exception mistaking itself for the rule. They succeeded in a system designed for them to succeed and assumed that meant the system was fair. They won a rigged game and called it merit. And now they defend that game with religious fervor, because admitting it was rigged means admitting they didn't earn what they have, and that truth would shatter them. But let's talk about what this does to you, because this isn't just about them. It's about the psychological warfare they wage without even knowing it. Every time they call you lazy, you internalize it. Every time they question your work ethic, you doubt yourself. Every time they compare their 20s to yours, you feel inadequate. This is gaslighting on a generational scale. They're making you question your reality, making you believe that your struggle is your failure, that your inability to replicate their success is a character flaw, that the math not working is somehow your fault. And the worst part, it works. You start believing them. You start thinking, maybe I'm not trying hard enough. Maybe I'm too soft. Maybe I am entitled for wanting what they had. And that's when they win, not by defeating you, by making you defeat yourself, by turning their privilege into your shame, by making their advantages into your inadequacies. This is the real psychology you need to understand, not just how they think, but how their thinking infects yours. So let's break the infection. Let's talk about deprogramming. First truth. You are not lazy. You're exhausted. There's a difference. Lazy is refusing to work. Exhausted is working constantly and getting nowhere. You're not avoiding effort. You're trapped in systems designed to extract maximum labor for minimum reward. You're not entitled for wanting stability. You're reasonable. Wanting affordable housing isn't entitlement. Wanting education that doesn't require decades of debt isn't entitlement. Wanting a job that pays enough to live on isn't entitlement. These were baseline expectations in their time, and they should be in yours. The fact that they're not isn't your failure. It's systematic theft. Resources were redistributed upward. Opportunities were gate-kept. Systems were rigged. And then you were blamed for the results. That's not economics. That's psychological warfare. And the first step to winning is refusing to internalize their narrative. Their disappointment in you is not data. It's projection. Their criticism is not insight. It's defense. Their advice is not wisdom. It's anachronism. Stop giving their words power over your reality. Second truth. They need you more than you need them. Think about it. Who's really dependent here? They need you to keep the systems running they're too old to operate. They need you to fund the Social Security they're draining. They need you to buy the overpriced assets they're selling. They need you to maintain the institutions they're abandoning. They need you to validate their choices by following their path. But what do you need from them? Nothing they're willing to give. You don't need their approval. You need their resources. You don't need their advice. You need them to get out of the way. You don't need their validation. You need them to stop hoarding opportunities. This is the power shift they're terrified of. The moment you realize you don't need their permission, their control evaporates. The moment you stop seeking their approval, their judgment becomes meaningless. The moment you build outside their systems, their gatekeeping fails. And they know this. They know their relevance is evaporating. They know their power is borrowed time. They know the world is moving on without them. And instead of gracefully transitioning, they're clawing, desperately, pathetically, predictably. Let's talk about their fear of obsolescence, because this is the core wound. Boomers aren't just afraid of dying. They're afraid of being forgotten. They're afraid that history will judge them accurately. They're afraid that their grandchildren will look back and see them not as the greatest generation, but as the greediest. And they should be afraid, because that's exactly what's happening. The historical record is being written in real time. Climate data, economic inequality metrics, social mobility statistics, healthcare outcomes, educational debt, housing affordability, wage stagnation. Every single metric shows the same thing. They inherited abundance and created scarcity. They were given opportunity and manufactured obstacles. They experienced easy mode and made the game unwinnable. And the data doesn't lie. The numbers don't care about their feelings. History will remember them as the generation that had everything and gave nothing, that consumed the future to fund the present, that prioritized their comfort over their children's survival. And deep down, they know it. That's why they're so defensive. That's why they're so angry. That's why they can't let go, because letting go means facing what they've done, and they're not strong enough for that truth. But here's where you gain power. Understanding their psychology means predicting their moves. They're going to keep clinging, keep voting against your interests, keep defending broken systems, keep lecturing you about bootstraps while collecting benefits you'll never see, keep hoarding wealth while the planet burns, keep demanding respect while giving none. This isn't going to change, so stop waiting for it. Stop hoping they'll wake up. Stop thinking you can convince them. You can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. Their worldview isn't based on logic. It's based on ego protection. And egos don't surrender. They die. So you work around them. You build parallel systems. You create new institutions. You network horizontally while they cling vertically. You adapt while they ossify. You evolve while they calcify. This is how you win, not by fighting them directly, but by making them irrelevant, by building a world that functions without their permission, by creating value in spaces they don't control, by defining success in terms they don't recognize. And when they call you lazy for not playing their game, you smile, because you're playing a different game entirely, one they can't even see, one they're not invited to, one where their rules don't apply. The psychology of baby boomers is the psychology of a generation in denial. Denial about their privilege, denial about their impact, denial about their legacy. They live in a bubble of selective memory and motivated reasoning. They remember working hard but forget the safety nets. They remember struggling but forget the opportunities. They remember sacrifice but forget the abundance. And this denial is their prison. They're trapped in a story where they're the heroes. And any information that contradicts that story must be rejected. This is why conversations don't work. This is why facts don't matter. This is why you can't change their minds. Because changing their minds would require changing their identity. And identity is the last thing humans surrender. So they'll go to their graves believing they earned it all, believing the system was fair, believing you're just not trying hard enough. And you need to be okay with that, because their delusion is not your responsibility. Their awakening is not your burden. Your job is not to fix them. Your job is to survive them, to outlast them, to build something better than what they left you. That's the shift. That's the psychology you need to adopt. Not victim, not rebel, builder. You're not fighting the old world. You're creating the new one, and they can't stop that. They can only watch.